Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Sierra Johnson. I'm the Education Manager with the VPPPA National Office, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Communicating Risk to Frontline Workers with JHA. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. We will have time at the end of today's presentation for Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to type those into the chat that is located on the right side of your screen. And just to get you comfortable with the platform, if you don't mind a conversation starter, if you will, I would love if you could tell me where it is that you're joining us from today. I know we've got a wide and varied crowd. Today's presentation is in collaboration with OSHA's Safe and Sound campaign. Safe and Sound is a year-round campaign to encourage every workplace to have a safety and health program. Links to learn more about the campaign can be found below today's presentation, but I will say an excellent place to start is to join them for Safe and Sound Week. That'll be hosted August 12th through 18th this year. Details also linked below. Kicking us off with today's presentation is Daniel Charles, Corporate EH&S Manager with Brandenburg Industrial Service Company and current VPPPA National Board Director at Large. Daniel has been with Brandenburg for over 17 years. He is a certified safety professional, as well as a certified industrial hygienist and a special government employee. Joining Daniel a little later on in today's presentation will be Dr. John Mulroy, Director of Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program. In addition to his work with OSHA, with Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program, John is also a certified safety professional, as well as a faculty member at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He holds a PhD in safety sciences, also from IUP, on top of a master's in environmental management from Duquesne University. I am very excited to have the both of them with us today. And with that, I will turn the floor over to you, Dan, to get started.
Thank you, Sierra. Hello, everyone. I was going to present on, job hazard analysis and how we do it at Brandenburg and communicating the risk to our frontline workers. We consider these our employees' documents, not really a safety document or a safety generated document, but just a way for us to plan our job sites out and manage that risk associated with our work. Just for a background, I work for Brandenburg. We're a demolition environmental remediation business, so we have a high risk industry. We do implosions. We do a lot of industrial work, depending on the industry we're working in, whether it's steel, manufacturing, power gen, petrochem. We work for a lot of those industries. Some of the examples I'm going to provide later on are from those industries. So it's one of those things where we borrow information from our customers, and some of our customers have outstanding safety programs that we learn from on every project. So with that, I was going to go ahead and get into the program of what the purpose of a job hazard analysis is. And I'll probably just say JHA or TSA or PHA from here on out, just because it's easier to say, and I know those are the acronyms that everybody's used to saying. But why do we do these? Is number one, it's a great way to stay OSHA compliant with the OSHA requirements. 1926 is where I'm from. We don't really have a set standard for performing a JHA or a job hazard analysis for our tasks. But there's the standard 1910-132 is really the only place that I can find that talks about a hazard analysis. And it really paraphrased says employees shall assess the workplace to determine if hazards are present. So what that says is you look at your workplace and determine what hazards are present, and then you look at what you can do to mitigate those hazards. So we use JHAs, we use PTAs to kind of organize these projects or these tasks in a method that's easy to understand and easy to generate. So, when we look at a task, if we're doing asbestos abatement or a demolition project, we kind of take, bite-sized pieces of our task and, we'll look at it day by day and say, okay, what are we doing today? And then what are the hazards and controls of those activities? I know for manufacturing, and there's probably a lot of manufacturing folks on the presentation, I would look at it as, non-routine tasks is, kind of what, where you'd be at with construction, or routine tasks if those things change. So again, it breaks things down into tasks and steps that can be used to determine the steps of the highest risk. So I like to think of it as our supervisors can use these documents as a planning tool to set their day up instead of just going through and kind of winging it. It gives them a platform where they can write down step by step of what they want to do. And it's a really good method to keep your meetings organized, to keep your safety meetings organized. We do health and safety meetings every day, and it gives us, a platform to where we can present these things in a logical format and keep our employees engaged and our employees, paying attention and for them to give feedback as well as we present these tasks. So next slide, please. So like I said before, TSAs, JSAs, JHAs, we call them task safety analysis at Brandenburg, job safety analysis at other companies, job hazard analysis, pre-task analysis, activity hazard awareness or analyses. These are all different things that we use in our companies. I'm sure there's about 15 more acronyms that are out there, but those are kind of the more common ones that I see and that I've seen, other companies use. Again, we're a contractor, so we're generally in someone else's house. So we have our own forms that we like to use or we can use for our planning purposes. But, without calling companies out by name, when we walk into their door, they want us to use their documents because that's what they like to see and that's what they like to use. And really that's, what they're used to seeing too. So we jump back and forth on the different formats of these hazard analysis. But again, they're all hazard analysis. They all do the same thing, no matter what the format is. Sometimes people call them risk assessments. Caution that, risk assessment in my world is kind of like a big picture thing. So if you have a refinery, they might have a risk assessment that's based on the physical, chemical, biological, environmental, community damage. So really, the risk assessments are really big pictures. But if you look at, a JHA, a job hazard analysis, now you're kind of looking at, kind of a specific thing or a specific task. So that's kind of what we use in the health and safety world. Next, please. So, like I said, this is Brandenburg's form. There's nothing fancy about it. It really just has this three categories. So this is the task steps, the hazards, and the safe work plan of how we're going to mitigate these hazards. Again, I prefer we keep ours simple because this is a format that I would give our frontline supervisors to say, okay, here's your document. You guys fill this out as you're doing your safety meeting. But it keeps them organized and gives them enough spaces where they can be specific, but not, 18 pages where it's going to be, cumbersome and they're going to skip steps and they're going to, leave steps out just by the basis of, completing the form. I don't want people just completing a form to complete a form. I want them to, I want these to be thoughtful. I want them to be well thought out and, with the hazards and with the contingency plans and the safe work plan. So again, that's an example of what we use. I have another example next of one of our customers' forms. This is a pre-task analysis. So I don't know how well you can see it on your screen, but this one really gets into the energy sources a little bit more than our form does. It goes through the permit status if you have to get a permit, such as, confined space, electrical, combustion equipment, like a hot work permit. It goes through excavation. So you can see the permit section near the top, and then on down, it gives like a checklist of, potential hazards, electrical hazards, pneumatic hazards, hot work hazards, cryogenic gases hazards. So if those are checked, obviously those would require a safe, another safe work plan. But you can see the level of detail that this company goes to. That's, again, a little more difficult on the front end than ours. The second page of this form, which I didn't include it just because I didn't want to make a slideshow longer than it has to be. But the second page of this document looks like ours, where it has the work steps, the hazards, and the controls identical as you'd normally see. But again, it gives a little bit more information on the front side that maybe you can use to help pre-plan your day. Like, let's say if you are needing a hot work permit or a confined space permit. So you review these things with the employees as the day starts. So the next example I have is this company calls it an activity hazard assessment. What's interesting about this example is they go into a little bit more of a risk assessment form on the colored portions where it's green, yellow, and red. So they actually require us to go through and rate our hazards based on the risk. So, for example, if it's a slight or no injury hazard, then it would get a 1 or a 2. If it's a moderate, like say maybe a recordable or something like that, then it's maybe a yellow. But if the consequence is maybe a SIF event, which is significant injury or fatality, then those would be in the red and black categories, and they would rate that based on the potential or the not the severity of the consequence, but how often you would see that. So again, if it's a rare occasion that doesn't present a high risk, then it would be a 1. If it's a leading edge work and you're going to be at that leading edge for weeks on end, and the consequence of that could be a fatality, then you're looking at the red or black areas. So what they require on this potential example, or for this example, is that if it's in the red or the black and you don't have a elimination or a engineering control, then they don't allow that work. So that gives them a method to permit or allow their contractors to do work based on the overall risk, the risk activity assessment rating. So again, if it's if you do the math and it goes 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, you multiply that out. If it's a catastrophic event that's almost certain to happen, that will be on the bottom right corner where we wouldn't perform that work without additional safeguards to kind of lessen the risk of those items. So again, it takes more thought to do this, and I wouldn't expect frontline supervisors to really do this on a daily basis. I think this will be more of a safety professional. A safety professional sitting at a desk, assessing the risk of this form. But it is a good way to look at a project based on the overall risk assessment, rather than the just the hazards and the task. So next, so this is a Brandenburg project. You can pull it off YouTube. We have all kinds of videos on there, but you can see the kind of what we do is really high risk activities. The video plays, it's we're just an implosion. We're imploding a power plant down south. But so the way we look at things is if we don't properly plan these things, if we don't properly address the hazards of a situation in an implosion like this, you could have catastrophic outcomes. So we pay really close attention on planning, not just these type of events, but in overall events. That way we can manage the risk to prevent those catastrophic incidents. So next I want to go through the, kind of the development of the JHAs, or how we develop JHAs that are at my company. Is, first step is break down the task into easy to follow tasks. Don't overwhelm the employees. Don't have 50 steps to an overall task, because you're just going to overwhelm everybody and they're going to kind of forget the steps in between. And I guess the rule of thumb that I've always followed is, 5 to 10, 10 to 12, don't really go over 12 steps, just because, you're just watering it down a little bit. So for example, if you need to use a ladder for an activity, don't state that, put the ladder in place, secure the ladder, use 3 points of contact. Then, if those are all your steps to the activity, you're just going to lose everybody in the beginning. So, we all work with, well-trained, well-equipped personnel that know the proper way to set up a ladder. So, that might be a control, not necessarily a step. Also, what I like to look at is, do these per crew, because, if we're doing a demolition job and the demo crew is doing one activity, the hazardous material abatement crew is doing something else, and then we have a construction crew on the other side of the job, I don't include other person's steps with each crew, because the demo crew, it really might not matter what the abatement crew is doing, and vice versa. So I like to keep these steps really focused on the individuals involved with that group. And a lot of times, I know safety, I'm a safety professional, so I know the safety professional are tasked with generating these JHAs, but I think sometimes the step-by-step approach of how you're actually performing these tasks is really best performed by a frontline supervisor. They know the job better than we do for the most part. That's why they're the supervisor. So again, having them either work side by side with you on this, or have them generate the task steps, because they know the order of what they want to do with it. So occasionally, sometimes safety guys and gals, we're guessing, and we're just we're not going to be as detailed as maybe they are with these items. So if you go next, I got an example of the JHA these are the task steps for the implosion that you just saw, or one similar to it. So you see it's not overwhelming with the amount of information on the form. So this is kind of a higher level where everybody's going to be trained on the first one, but it goes through, the mobilization, what we're going to do pre, how we're going to, take accountability in the middle, and how we're going to commence with the implosion activities, and then what we're going to do post implosion. So again, high level information that's kind of broken down into chunks. That way it's not, you're not going to lose anybody in the middle somewhere. So everybody's really clear on, the steps that we're going to take for this implosion. So the next step is determine the hazards, and probably the hardest part of the job hazard analysis is determining the hazards. So you want to analyze each step to determine the hazards, of course. And what I like to look at is, okay, have we had any previous incidents with that, or any injuries or property damage when we've done this activity before? Are there any risks for civil events? You'd like to, address those immediately, because if you have those, the chance for, significant injury or anything, those are definitely the ones you want to look at and manage properly. Any risk for property damage or environmental releases or anything, also important. And then evaluate your environmental conditions. Is it hot or cold? I mean, we're in the summertime. We went through a heat wave. Are there mitigations you need to do for heat stress or cold stress, depending on the time of the year? Consider your energy sources. And I got a good slide next. Don't go next yet, but a good slide next that talks about energy sources and how that plays a part into hazard identification. And also, don't forget, health issues. Are you dealing with, lead, or are you dealing with asbestos or noise? So always consider, your health items as well, and how you're going to mitigate those, whether it be respiratory protection or ventilation or other, some other type of control. And then, include hazards that have the greatest likelihood and the highest severity, such as lacerations, fall, hazardous energy. Those are the things that, tend to get us most often. And look at the next slide. I don't know if you've seen this, the energy wheel before, but it's a really good pictograph of, the energy sources that the Professional Safety Journal back in 2021, Dr. Matthew Howell, he came up with the idea of, almost all injuries are the outcome of an energy source. They've done studies since 1973 and the 1970s where they looked at all the, they analyzed, thousands of injuries for employees, and they kind of narrowed it down to where every injury is a result of an energy source. So Dr. Howell, he does a great presentation where he has cranes in the air working on a pipeline, and he asks a simple question in the classroom. Okay, what energy sources do you see, or what hazards do you see? And obviously, everybody sees the cranes with the loads floating in the air, and they know it's a gravity source. Or they see trucks and cars and mobile equipment, so they know there's motion out there where you can get struck by something. They see welders and compressed gases, so they immediately go to pressure. So it's an exercise in hazard identification, because what ends up happening is you probably get about 75-80% of the hazards that are really quickly identified, and that's what happens when we're doing our JHAs. Is you identify the hazards that we see most often, whether it's struck by gravity, with falls, sound, or anything like that. But there's always hazards that we miss. So having this energy wheel, and I know Brandenburg, we've adopted something similar, and I know a lot of other companies have adopted energy wheels or something that looks really similar like this, as an exercise for our employees to identify the hazards. Because if you identify the hazards, then you're more likely to put adequate controls in place. But when you fail to identify the hazards, potentially you have no controls planned for it. So anyway, if you haven't seen it before, it's the Professional Safety Journal, which ASSP, they have a great article on it. I encourage you to read it. It gets really into depth of hazard identification, percentages, and everything. So I recommend looking through that article. Next is step 3 is the hazard controls. So as a hygienist, as a safety professional, we all like to use the hierarchy of controls when we're looking at hazard control. So elimination, obviously, getting rid of the hazard is the most effective way to control a hazard. So I use falls for examples because it's, in construction, it is the number one leading of fatalities in construction. So again, if you use fall protection as an example, your first thing you want to do is eliminate the hazard. Don't send someone up on the roof. And if you don't send someone on the roof, they can't fall. Next, engineering controls, guardrail systems, some other engineering control, hole covers that engineer the hazard out. Administrative controls, having rules in place. And then, fall protection equipment, PFAS is obviously the last line of defense. So I encourage you to use the hierarchy of controls when you're looking at mitigating these hazards. And also make sure you don't leave any of the hazards out in the second step. Make sure you address all the hazards that you see. Again, you don't want to identify something and then later on forget that you didn't have a control put in place. And again, be concise. If you remember my example of the Brandenburg document, these are not novels. These are pretty concise documents where, you want to be descriptive, but not overwhelming with the amount of words you use in these documents, because you will lose people when you're reviewing these things if they're long-winded and long written. So next thing I want to talk about some do's and don'ts that I've learned with doing probably thousands of JHAs for demolition is first I want to go over some don'ts. Is number one, don't have anybody sign a JHA without a verbal or comprehensive review. I've been at projects before where you walk in and I would say we would do this, but I've seen it where hey, the JSA is on the table, sign it and let's go. Or there's a line of people and they line up and they're signing the JHA as they're walking out the door. So don't have a document unless you intend to use it. So do a good job, a comprehensive verbal review or a presentation review like we're doing now, but make sure you review it with the employees and you have a complete understanding of it. Next, don't forget to include supervision in the development of the JHA. They're organizing the task. This is their work that we're supporting. So make sure you get their buy-off, or even have them develop the steps, and then we can help them out with the hazard identification and controls. But it's important that you have supervision in on this, because frontline supervisors really, in my opinion, drive safety in the workplace. And next is don't include too many people in the JHA review. I mean, having 75 people in a classroom that you're reviewing this with is going to be counterproductive, in my opinion, because it's, the more people you have in a review, the less likely they are to ask questions or speak up. A lot of shy individuals out there that don't like speaking in front of people. So keep them short and sweet and keep it, maybe with people just involved with that task. And next, don't forget to review and update these JHAs periodically or when the task is complete. If you have an incident, it's a great time to look at these JHAs and include those with your next one, or include these learning opportunities with new JHAs, because if it happened once, it can happen again. Part of your lesson learned or your hazard alerts, definitely include those on your on the next round of JHAs. Next, I'm going to go over some of the do's, some of the best practices that I like. Is make sure review incorporates opinions and suggestions from the workers. Some of the best ones that I've been involved with are a group project. They, we can look at the project, we can tell the steps, and then we ask the employees, okay, what hazards do you guys see? Okay, what do you think we should do to mitigate these hazards? See it as a training activity, because maybe you're more experienced personnel on the job site. By talking this through, teaches our younger generations of some of the hazards and some of the experience that the older generations have had. Another thing I like to do in the field is, keep notes on the JHAs. These are living documents in a way. So if things change in the field, maybe you don't need to go back to the office to generate a new document. Include those notes on the JHA, review it with everyone, have everyone initial it that they did review it, and move forward. I've seen some really good ones that I've, painstakingly, typed up, printed up, reviewed, had everybody sign on it. And when I go look at it in the field, it's got ink all over it, just because, they identified something that maybe I didn't see in the morning that, they want to include, which 100% encourage that. Next, make sure you update it with processes or equipment changes, and then make sure that, the JHA is available for everyone performing the task. Have project sites where the JHA is located at the entrance to the work site. So, we have 18 different work areas on a nuclear site. And when I walk up to that group, the first thing they do is they give me their JHA and say, hey, please review this. This is our JHA from working. If you have any questions, let me know. And then I need you to sign off on that you understand everything that's on that document. So a good way to incorporate and make sure that even your visitors are included with your JHAs. Next is just a picture, good kind of the size crew I like to see in a JHA. You have it's kind of like the Knights of the Round Table, where everybody's in a circle and you're talking through what you're doing for that day. This is a project out east but the supervisor was running the meeting basically. But you go around and say, okay, this is what we're doing for the day. These are some of the hazards. And you look at your key guys. You say, okay, do you see anything else? And then you go around the circles. And say, does anybody have anything else? And you encourage everyone to speak up so they have buy-in and they can relate their experiences on this and get employee involvement on this. Next, please. So this example of something I may type up in the field. So very complex, high level. It's really wordy. So it's something that maybe I would use for a project. So there's different rules of thought on job hazard analysis. One is it covers an entire demolition job. So you take the task steps by the project by really high level and look at, okay, we're going to get set up, we're going to mobilize, we're going to do the hazard material removal, then we're going to use heavy equipment to tear the building down, then we're going to load everything out. So anyway, high level activities, but it's much more wordy, it's much more organized as far as a project level. And compared to the next slide, where this is written by one of our supervisors that are employees in the field. My apologies, it didn't come across very good on the screen, but it's a good example of what our supervisor would use in the field. You can see it's a lot different than the one I came up with the entire project. This is for an individual day and the work they were doing. And I included this one especially because if you can read it well, this is entirely in Spanish. This was one of our crews that are Spanish speaking. So make sure that these documents are in a language that the employees can understand. If we have mixed groups, we make sure we have a bilingual supervisor that can either translate these documents or whatever. But you got to make sure that the employees who are affected by this understand it, because they're signing that they understand and review the document, and we just want to make sure that they're able to do that. Next is we call this a safe task analysis card, or a stat card at Brandenburg. So you have the JHA, which is kind of a overall day with the entire group that addresses the task and the hazards. We kind of take that a step down, where we ask each of our employees to do a hazard assessment on their own. So this gentleman's Mr. Webster. He was on our project. He was doing some demo work. So each person on our job site every day before they get going after the safety meeting, they look at what activity they're doing for that day and they address the hazards as they see it. Because, if you have an operator, he's not going to have the same hazards as a welder or a burner is. So we ask each employee to, address those potential hazards and what controls they're going to have. And again, we find it's a really good method to have employee engagement, number one, and also have our employees take 2 minutes and think about their own personal safety on the job sites. There's an adage of who's the most important person for safety on the job site, and most people will say, oh, it's the safety guy. And now, as we all know, it's not the safety guy who's responsible for everyone's safety, it's each individual. So this gives them that opportunity to think about that, at least document that they've reviewed that and addressed the issues. So lastly, I wanted to kind of a few takeaways that I hope you got from this meeting is, one, pay particular attention to the identification of hazards. Most of the root cause analysis that we do most have hazard identification as one of the contributing factors or one of the root causes. So a hazard identification is huge. If you don't see the hazard, you don't plan for the hazard, and you could have something happen. Next is use these documents as a place for worker engagement and ownership. You want employees involved with these. It's not just a paper that they sign as they go to work, and it's just another document that they sign. So make it as incorporate it into the safety meeting, especially get everyone's take on it. The men and women that are doing these tasks, they're the professionals. They're the ones that's going to know more about these activities than a safety person ever will. And again, like I said, it's not a safety document. These documents belong to the crew members and the persons who are doing the work. So a lot of the words used in these should come from them. So I know we'll have time for questions later on, but that was the kind of conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you very much. And with that, I am going to turn things over now to our other presenter, Dr. John Mulroy.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. A little bit of a challenge here, campus-wide power outage, but we're working our way through that right now. So just to top off of Dan, OSHA publishes the Job Hazard Analysis Guideline. It's document 3071. And if you don't have that document, I highly advise every practicing safety professional should have that to ensure that they're following the best practices that the agency outlines, and to ensure that if you have a functioning formal occupational health and safety management system in place, that it's supporting and offering continual improvement to the OHSMM. So as we learned, the JHA reduces loss incidents, obviously. That is a core deliverable, but it also reduces those direct and indirect costs through the more effective identification, evaluation, and control of those hazards. So as we're identifying the physical and health hazards and identifying our target populations through the JHA, and just remember that also includes the environment, any potential impact to the environment. We have the opportunity to conduct both a formal and informal risk assessment through the JHA tool. So, and the biggest outcome there is that communication piece, right? So the desired outcomes of an effective JHA is part of our written program, part of our training, part of our layers of protection that we're offering the frontline workers. We want to make sure that it follows the framework of the safety management system standards, that there's worker involvement, that there's management leadership, that most importantly, we have effective two-way communication. And that is really the foundation of an effective management system, whether it's quality, it's safety, environmental with 14,001. We want to make sure that the safety and health management system, whether yours is formal and it's certified compliant, or it's informal and you have the framework operational, we want to make sure that that communication tool through the JHA gives us a hierarchy of controls in that application, both elimination, substitution, engineering controls, and the resulting layers of protection are effective. And most importantly, that communication, that two-way communication, leads to what I think is one of the most beneficial outcomes of a JHA tool, and that is critical systems thinking, critical safety thinking. We want to have an environment where the workers feel safe to challenge conventional wisdom. So that is really the goal that we're trying to achieve here. Next slide, please. So the e-tools that are available out there, right? You can find a lot of information that OSHA provides on job hazard analysis, but also the pre-job brief. And that's the point of what I'm trying to communicate to the audience today is the JHA, while it's very formal and structured, there are other tools that we can have as part of our safety management system that bolster that process, and that's really important. So the agency e-tools connection, we have on the process of the job hazard analysis that we're identifying and anticipating task-specific and task-unique hazards. We ensure that the workers clearly understand what their authority is, what their responsibilities are, what their duties are, by going through the JHA, by systematically, literally going through and understanding step 1, step 2, step 3. We want to make sure that the hazards that are created by the job are effectively controlled and mitigated. But we also want to understand what's going on around us, particularly on a construction environment, that other subcontractors, the hazards they may be creating for us. We want to make sure that the personal protective equipment and our written programs, whether it's lockout, tagout, or fall protection, those layers of protection that are built into those written programs, and the last layer of defense on the hierarchy, or PPE, are effective. So essentially what we're doing is we're challenging these rules, the regulations, the plans, the standard operating procedures that are identified in that process to ensure that they're effective. On the pre-job briefing side of it, OSHA informs us that the impacts of those adjacent work tasks and subcontractors, if we're going into a permanent required confined space and there's additional work just outside or maybe upstream or downstream of that particular space covered within the scope of that permit, we have the opportunity to address that. And the work that actually goes on outside of the JHA may not be addressed within that JHA, and it may not identify the hazards or be able to assess the risk that's associated with it. So if the work scope evolves or changes, right, where does the work as planned no longer align with the work performed, the pre-job briefing benefit allows us to be able to stop, and we could retool and conduct a second pre-job briefing that does address this emerging work scope, or something that pops up that we anticipated to be routine is suddenly now not routine. So the JHA would require a team to create a new document or a revision to that document, where the pre-job briefing offers a little bit more flexibility to the crew lead or the team leader, the foreman or supervisor, to the trained safety professional that's in the field. And that gives us the ability. So just remember that pre-job briefings are actually codified by the agency. You can find the pre-job briefing under 29 CFR 1910-269, the Power Generation, Transmission, and Distribution Standard, and its sister standard on 1926 in Subpart B. Next slide, please. So the pre-job briefing process really is a crew participatory process. And again, it is codified under 1910 and 1926. And what we learned is that there is a lot of value, what the peer-reviewed literature says, there's a lot of value with the pre-job briefing process, a tool to bolster the JHA, to bolster your occupational health and safety management system. The pre-job briefing is essentially a conventional assessment or conversational assessment of current and anticipated conditions that are present in the workplace. But it also, most importantly, it provides an opportunity, assuming that the management leadership key aspect of that safety management system, that key aspect is there. It gives them an opportunity, the workers who are actually facing the hazard on the front line, an opportunity to challenge that conventional wisdom. And as we know, the JHA, because of its formality and its structure, can have some inherent limitations. And again, it is a linear process. It goes step 1 to step 2 to step 3. But as emerging work or unplanned work or non-routine work is revealed, and suddenly work performed does not align with work planned, we can identify opportunities where new hazards are popping up on the work site. So, for example, during a pre-job briefing, it's an opportunity for this two-way conversation. If one of the crew is designated to be the authorized entrant in the permanent required confined space, he has an opportunity to challenge the permitting system, the written programs, and he may ask the foreman or the supervisor providing the four gas meter, has the gas meter been calibrated this month? And if the answer is yes, the second line of questioning could be, have we completed a functional test today? And if we have completed a functional test today, then we have a higher level of assurance that 4-gas meter and the work plan does effectively address the scope of the work that we're doing. So next slide, please. So, the JHA is an essential, critical aspect of an overall safety management system. And it does reduce the residual risk beyond what we're able to accomplish through our traditional written programs like lockout, tagout, or permanent required confined spaces, hazard communication. It also supports and even fills in some of the latent weaknesses that may be embedded within our formal and informal training processes as well. But we've got to remember, in ISO 45001 or ANSI Z10, I'll quote from 45001, under section 5.2 for occupational health and safety policies, that the top management shall establish, implement, and maintain an occupational health and safety policy that includes a commitment to consultation and participation of workers. What better way to show if your Z10 or 45001 equivalent program is going to meet muster of certification than to say, hey, we have a robust, effective, feasibly implemented job hazard analysis process that we bolster with a pre-job safety briefing as well to ensure any gaps or any weaknesses within the JHA process are addressed by that pre-job briefing step. So that's really critical. The pre-job briefing supplements that through real-time, at the job location hazard assessment. So as codified in 1926 in subpart B for power generation, transmission, and distribution, you've got to remember the agency weighed whether or not to put pre-job briefings into that revised standard, that promulgated standard. And they noted after weighing the advantages and disadvantages of that, of codifying a pre-job briefing within this vertical industry, that the best tool, that in fact was the best tool to reduce risk within power generation, transmission, and the way that the work gets done, oftentimes work is planned does not align with the work performed, and the pre-job briefing gives the foreman, the supervision, and management, as well as the workers, an opportunity to have a two-way conversation about that. So it really is a great supplemental tool that helps your organization achieve your desired safety outcomes. So as that work scope emerges, or the work scope changes, or it evolves, or new hazards are identified, whether they weren't identified through the JHA process and the teamwork that's required to generate that, or it's emerging work from a subcontractor adjacent to the work area, the pre-job briefing really does promote the critical thinking aspect of it. It identifies task critical steps. I think most importantly, it challenges the layers of protection that are found in job hazard analysis. To ensure that the prescribed, in the second column or the third column, the prescribed control measures are in fact effective and apply to the conditions that we find in the field as we're ready to begin this task. It ensures that all the workers understand what their duties and responsibilities are. It's an opportunity for junior workers and senior workers to be able to share their best practices and their experiences. It's an opportunity for supervision through their safety and health training to ensure that the RIC programs are complied with. And of course, that two-way conversation and that history that we have with the senior guys, it's an opportunity for them to be able to identify gaps in your written programs, which may generate that feedback loop that a management system encourages and produces. It serves an opportunity to go back to the written program and into your hazard communication or your fall protection written programs and tighten up the latent management weaknesses that may be embedded in there that you weren't aware of. So just imagine, the difference between a non-routine task and a routine task and how that would play out. So if we have a excavation that we're going to go into, we have a subcontractor that's working adjacent to us and they're ready to pour cement, and that truck arrived early, and the truck is there and it's idling. Suddenly our work within that excavation could potentially be impacted by the exhaust of that truck. Chemical and a standard operating procedure isn't available. And so the supervisor responsible for the job identifies an alternate chemical and purchases it outside of our hazard communication control processes. And we're going to be mixing two chemicals within that confined space. Perhaps the four gases that the sensors and the four gas meter are not designed to address the byproduct of that chemical interaction. So here a pre-job briefing may be able to capture these two particular instances. A third example may be we have material flowing down inwardly through a sloping bin, the traditional definition of a confined space. And for the JHA, those materials are continue to flow, but they stop. And the operator on the silo opens an observation port and sees that the material is bridging. And the only way to rectify the situation, get the material flow reestablished, is to enter and break that bridge, which of course we know is a high serious or fatal injury potential there with that type of a job. Next slide. And so, these are the essential elements of an effective pre-job brief. We want to establish our scope, identify the task steps, ensure that everybody's in agreement, both the planner and the workers who face the hazards in the field, that the controls are in place, that the workers are trained, prepped, they're equipped and ready to go, that there's effective two-way conversation going on that is supported, not just with strong management leadership, but that two-way communication is also supported amongst the peer group within the workers, that there's there's no culture that exists, some subculture of the overall company culture that exists where workers who have a genuine concern about a particular step or the effectiveness of a layer of protection are reluctant to speak up, that they don't feel that they have the opportunity to voice their concerns. We execute that work, and then I think one of the most important aspects, whether it's a job hazard analysis or pre-job briefing, is that two-way conversation during the post-job briefing or the debrief process. So as we're establishing our work scope, we're assigning roles and responsibilities. We're understanding what my job is, what Bob's job is, what Joe's job is, what Sarah's job is, and everybody's ready to execute that work. We understand what the critical steps are, those at which really we've achieved tolerable levels of risk in the work planning and the controls that we're putting in place. But these critical steps, if not done properly, or if they don't go exactly as planned, may produce a higher level of risk as a result. We have an opportunity to engage workers in behaviors and the anticipated behaviors that are expected to ensure that the training qualifications are in place, that we discuss at-risk behaviors that would not be acceptable during this task, and the precursors that lead to them. The two-way conversation, again, the culture has to support this piece for JHAs and pre-job briefs to really be robust. And that is open communication. You need a management team that is demonstrating humility, that is a learning organization, and you have peers within the work group that support concerns and voicing those concerns. Next slide. So as I've mentioned before, JHA is by design linear thinking. It's step one, we're going to open the hatch. Step two, we're going to power a piece of equipment. Step three, we're going to energize it, and so on and so forth down through the JHA process. But the pre-job briefing, in the way that it supports the JHA, is it promotes lateral thinking. So instead of it being from A to B and going step one, step two, step three, as we well know, life gets in the way, and suddenly the work plan doesn't quite align with the work that's actually happening in the field. And so a pre-job briefing offers the opportunity for us to stop. We can have an abbreviated informal pre-job briefing. Maybe it's just between two workers of a 4-person crew. And suddenly now we're making observations of job conditions. We're considering adjacent work that's going on with the subcontractors. We're testing the effectiveness of the written procedure, standing operating procedures. And suddenly now the work scope has changed. So we're right back up into step one. So all of these aspects of it, of an effective pre-job briefing, all of these different steps really are happening simultaneously. And that is by definition lateral thinking. Next slide. So the value, right, to the occupational health and safety management system here, the formal JHA can be completed and it can be created in the field. The pre-job briefing, as a way to bolster that process, it just offers additional flexibility and versatility above and beyond the traditional JHA process. The job brief is done in real time. Those observations are going on in real time. Work that could not have been anticipated in the planning room is now suddenly being observed in real time, and the layers of protection that have been identified to control those hazards that were in the planning room at the time and part of the JHA process. Now we have an opportunity to address those work because of adjacent activities. Job conditions change. We're in a trench. We have a sudden pop-up rainstorm. Suddenly our soil types are from A to B, B to C. We need to slope. We need to put a trench box in. So we can course correct as the work commences and ensure that work as planned fully aligns with the work as executed. So those outcomes, both an effective job hazard analysis and the job brief, they obviously ultimately they reduce the residual risk that's associated with workplace injuries, right? Any of those losses, whether it's an injury to a worker, we have damage to company equipment, we have an impact to the environment. If we're in a manufacturing facility and setting, that there's no damage to the facility itself. A piece of equipment strikes an overhead structure or the bridge crane suddenly misaligns in the way that we're turning apart, and we have damage to the facility or we have damage to the product itself. So all of those aspects, regardless of the industry you're in, just doesn't have to be power generation, transmission, and distribution. The pre-job briefing and the job hazard analysis certainly add value to the safety management system. It identifies those latent management weaknesses that exist, that are embedded deeply within our written programs, within our training processes, and it ensures that those latent weaknesses are identified before they reveal themselves through the release of unexpected energy. So morale improved, productivity goes up, worker participation, which is a main component and driver of the occupational safety and health management system as far as worker participation goes. It demonstrates management leadership. They're allocating resources to the job hazard analysis. They're allocating resources to the pre-job briefing process. So it's all evidence, all documentation of an effective health and safety management system in place. Next slide. So what we're trying to do is institutionalize our learning, right? What we want to be able to do is ensure that any of the lessons learned, any of the work that as we were executing it, did not align fully with what we had anticipated. Those hazards are effectively addressed. Our written programs are updated and revised. We're talking about these deeply embedded management weaknesses within our occupational health and management systems. And the post-job brief really does offer an opportunity for us to, again, if the culture supports it, if the peer group supports each other for speaking up, if the supervision is truly fully engaged, if management is providing the resources that's required to conduct that post-job review, we can institutionalize what we now have as new learning, right? We identified the gaps in our written programs. We identified gaps in training. We identified gaps in our personal protective equipment, that it wasn't effective. It didn't quite protect us. The conditions on the ground didn't quite match the conditions we anticipated in the planning stage. The pre-job briefing certainly does strengthen the formal job hazard analysis process as well. So the learnings that come out of the post-job brief can be institutionalized within the revision, the new revision of the job hazard analysis. Most importantly, job hazard analysis and the pre-job briefing certainly provide a critical opportunity for workers to be able to participate in the system, and for management to just not say the words about safety, but actually demonstrate their duty to provide a safe and healthy workplace for their employees. So these two tools work in synergistically, and they provide within the occupational health and safety management system. They provide that opportunity for feedback. They provide that opportunity for continual improvement, which is a required aspect, a required outcome of an effective safety management system. It certainly does formalize and institutionalize our workers' knowledge and that they have about the layers of protection that are prescribed within our written programs. It verifies, for example, lockout, tagout, that the machine-specific procedures and instructions that we have for effective lockout by the authorized workers that are in fact effective, and they do protect anybody that's standing by that may be adjacent to the work, and to protect those workers as well. So the pre-job brief ensures that we're ready to do the work. We have the right equipment in place, that the layers of protection, we've challenged them. The conventional wisdom that was developed in the planning room, we've challenged the effectiveness of them. And now through the post-job review, we're able to test whether the planning matched the work that was performed, and when the work was performed, was the outcome achieved. What a safety management system really drives is that tolerable level of risk, residual risk. And remember, a post-job review can be triggered at any time. So when work doesn't align with work executed, does not align with work planned, that's an excellent opportunity to sit down and discuss why that was in fact the case. Just an informal 5 why investigative process could reveal some of those deeply embedded management weaknesses within the occupational health and safety management system. So again, the post-job review ensures that continual improvement of the management systems. It ensures that we have effective preventive and corrective actions, and it ensures that we're achieving our desired outcomes as a result. Next slide. So those are the references that were pulled for this portion of the pre-job brief. So I'll turn it back to Sierra, and if we have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we still have Daniel with us for the time being. We might lose him in just a moment. But we have had quite a few questions come through on the chat. So I want to get through as many of those as we can before we wrap up today. The first question just being, can you talk a little bit about the distinction between what we talk about when we say a risk assessment versus job hazard analysis? Because on the face of it, those can sound kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think job hazard analysis is more specific to the task you're doing that day, or work crew, or a group of individuals. And some people use it interchangeably as far as a risk assessment. They'll say, "Oh, can you do a risk assessment for torch cutting?" Risk assessment, by definition, is more broad stroke, more an industry or a facility has a risk assessment based on their operations that could include environmental controls, population, community controls. So again, I would say JHAs are more individualized and specific to a task rather than an entire plant, for example. And maybe John knows, maybe can define that better than I can.
So I think you've captured it pretty well. That you've hit the main topics there. I think you did a good job with it.
Excellent. Have you ever, or do you know of an instance in which you would have to produce a JHA for a legal reason, either as part of litigation or an investigation?
Absolutely. And, as far as any OSHA inspection, when they gather their documentation, if they're there for an opening, they're going to ask you for any pre-job briefs, any safety-related forms, training, documentation. It's all, any document that exists can be produced. So we talk to our employees about these all the time, where you put your name on a document, you make sure you review it first, because if there's an injury, for example, and that person who was injured is signed on to the JHA, during an OSHA interview, they could say, "Oh, did the employer review the hazards with you?" And the employee could say, "Oh, no, I didn't know the hazards." And well, you signed right here. You said you understood things when you signed that day. So again, with the documentation that exists, it has to be produced sometimes. So
I would add on to that as well that that I tell my undergraduate students all the time: if you don't write it down, it never happens. So it's important to be able to have that documentation available, whether it's a corporate audit or it's a wall-to-wall inspection by a co-show. But most importantly, that whether your occupational health and safety management system is formal or informal, that framework promotes continual improvement. And so if that document does become discoverable as part of an inspection or an investigation, a catastrophic investigation by a co-show, we're bound under the management system standards to ensure that we develop, we institutionalize that continual improvement. So if your JHA, the work as planned, does not align with the work performed, and a co-show is doing an interview with one of the workers as part of that investigation, whether it's a catastrophic event or a wall-to-wall, it's going to call into question your written program's validity, or your written programs and that continual improvement aspect. So it's really critical to ensure that these JHAs, these documents, whether it's a confined space permit, it's a work authorization permit under NFPA 70E, that they're updated, they're revised, and they reflect the work it performed.
Absolutely. Document. It's always better to have it and not necessarily need it than to find you need it and not have it. I think our final question as we wrap up would be, how frequently should you review and update those JHAs?
For us, we're construction demolition, so we update it as the tasks change. We do these daily because our days change. If you have a process, you're working in manufacturing, my recommendation would be routinely, definitely when the focus changes, if anything changes like that. I mean, if they get stale if you don't update them, routinely.
If you're based in 1910, you're general industry standards, you're a manufacturing facility, for example, or a warehouse, and you're utilizing the JHA tool, this is an excellent way to delegate those duties and responsibilities for safety and health from top management down through the ranks to middle and lower and frontline supervision. I would have human resources put updates of the JHA as part of the job description for a frontline supervisor. Let's say it's a large machining cell. There are 16 machines within that area that supervisor is responsible for. So there's 16 JHAs resulting with loading and unloading the table associated with those machines or the CNCs, to sit down with the crews quarterly, maybe every 6 months if it seemed to be rather routine work. But I think it's an excellent opportunity for engagement to get that middle level management in place. So and put it into part of the written job description. If frontline supervision, middle management, top management don't have specific duties related to occupational safety and health within their written job descriptions, then that needs to be rectified. And I think putting JHA is a measurable way. It's tangible. Those frontline supervisors understand it, and it's easy to measure at the end of the year, part of their performance review.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are right up against our time, so we are going to wrap things up today. But I do want to leave you all with some parting resources as part of the Safe and Sound campaign and other information you might find useful. All of this information will also be included in the post-event email, as well as a copy of the final slides and a copy of the recording for you. Like I mentioned, several resources pertinent to JHA's. Links for all of these can also be found in the description down below. Excellent resources. I'd also highly suggest, if you are interested in learning more about job hazard analysis specifically, that is the content topic area for Safe and Sound Week this year. Again, that is August 12th through 18th. You can officially sign up to participate in the campaign starting in early July, so just another week or so away. Participation is easy, fun, and it's really hard to beat free access to resources. I would also be remiss, I wouldn't be doing my job as the education manager for the association if I didn't also mention VPPPA Safety Plus Symposium. We're going to be in Aurora, Colorado this year, August 25th through 28th, celebrating our 40th National Symposium, covering a little bit of everything that you need. Sorry, it advanced on its own. Covering JHA's mental health and worker wellness, process safety management, industrial hygiene, employee engagement, technology in the workplace, just a few of the topics that we'll be covering. Safety Plus is designed around that philosophy of continuous improvement that we spoke about earlier. So whether you're a frontline worker looking for ways to improve your job and do it better, more efficiently, and safer, or a newly promoted supervisor trying to communicate with everyone now that you're in a new and unfamiliar role, or a member of your corporate C-suite looking toward the future and how to navigate these changing times, you are certain to walk away from the symposium with the knowledge and tools that you need to advance excellence in both yourself and your workplace. The deadline to register at the regular rate is tomorrow, June 28th. So if you are ready to take safety to that next level, I suggest you don't wait. And of course, I also invite all of you to join VPPPA's fantastic safety and health community. We represent 1,400 member companies and over 200,000 employees from manufacturing, oil and gas, and construction demolition, and any and every industry in between. Our members enjoy free webinars just like this at least twice a month, as well as exclusive savings on registration for events and online courses. We are a community of very passionate people, and I truly think that you would all fit right in. I want to thank you all for your time today and for joining us. I will be in touch with links to all of the resources and everything I have mentioned. And if you have any questions at all, I encourage you to reach out. We're always happy to help. And I hope you have a wonderful and safe rest of your day.